The Patriot Act is a controversial topic between most Americans. The USA Patriot Act is an American law that granted law enforcement more powers aimed at preventing terrorist attacks. There are positives and negative points about it, but which one weighs heavier? Join me in today's episode to talk about the Patriot Act.
Welcome to an all-new season of the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. This season, we dive into the most horrific unsolved murders in history. From the Black Dahlia murder to the unsolved murder of the Lady of the Dunes. Join us every Tuesday on YouTube or your favorite podcast platform. As always, we thank you for listening.
Welcome to the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast, the podcast where I share true crime stories for your entertainment. I'm your host, Larry Leese, and after reading about true crime stories, I condense all the content and bring valuable information to you. To stay up to date with all my content, check out my Twitter account at TrueCrimeNS. Find us on Instagram at True Crime Never Sleeps, or like us on Facebook. And now let's get into today's episode on the Patriot Act. Today's episode will be a little different than usual. We'll dive deep into politics, political events, and even our rights as citizens. Before we get started here, a disclaimer. I'm not criticizing people's political views. I'm simply analyzing facts and discussing them with you. If you agree or disagree, let's be respectful and try to learn with each other. Now, the big question of the day is, does the Patriot Act threaten our civil liberties? You may ask what the Patriot Act is. According to the Office of the Director of National Intelligence, the purpose of the USA Patriot Act is to deter and punish terrorist acts in the United States and around the world, to enhance law enforcement investigatory tools and other purposes, some of which include to strengthen U.S. measures to prevent, detect, and prosecute international money laundering and financing of terrorism, to subject to special scrutiny foreign jurisdictions, foreign financial institutions, and classes of international transactions or types of accounts that are susceptible to criminal abuse, to require all appropriate elements of the financial services industry to report potential money laundering, to strengthen measures to prevent use of the U.S. financial system for personal gain by corrupt foreign officials and facilitate repatriation of stolen assets to the citizens of countries to whom such assets belong. But why did it pass? It is worth knowing that the Patriot Act was passed only 45 days after the tragic events of 9/11, which can bring some bias to the decision due to the political and social stress the country was going through. The Act gave its law enforcement agencies a lot of power to investigate, indict, and bring terrorists to justice. It also led to increased penalties for committing and supporting terrorist crimes. All of these sounds good until now. Feels like our country will be safer. Feels like our country will be ready to deter any terrorist attack. Feels like anyone who tries an act of terrorism against America and Americans will be brought to justice. And after the act, the penalties are tougher now. All of those make us feel like terrorism would decrease and we live in a safer country. However, like everything else in life, the Patriot Act has two sides, a positive and a negative. And let's talk about it. Positives of the Act include the ability that federal agents have to use roving wiretaps while tracking international terrorists, trained to avoid surveillance by rapidly changing locations and communication devices. They are getting more technology and resources to be able to track down terrorists from all over the world. Because law enforcement has more unity through multiple communication channels, investigating officers can act quickly before a suspected attack is completed. Surveillance is easier because companies have a clear definition of who investigates terrorist activities. Faster inquiries are made about suspicious activities, strengthening terrorism prevention. Increased wiretapping lets investigators listen to conversations potentially threatening to national security. We can say that surveillance has definitely gotten better, but at what cost? All of these resources are not free. There's a cost behind every investment. For this investment specifically, the cost is around $100 billion per year. Is it worth it? I'm not going to get into this discussion, but please share your thoughts on our Twitter or Instagram. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Now on to the negative side. Citizens are losing their right of privacy. The technology and tracking devices are definitely a positive tool when tracking down criminals. But how about the good people? Well, their information is out there as well. The government has all the authority to look over anyone's information with rules that are not very clear, so they can pretty much investigate anyone's life. You might know where this is going. One of the most cherished American values is at risk, the right to privacy. Americans are proud to be private about their lives and only share what they see fit. But after the Patriot Act, their information is always out there, and someone can be looking over it. Now let's talk about the huge funding they receive. It creates some sort of stress to the population because of a simple question. Do they really need that much money? We are not so sure if they need that more. But more importantly, we have no clue on what exactly this money is going. And the last point I want to make, suspected terrorists have been imprisoned at Guantanamo Bay, Cuba, and other sites without always explaining why or allowing legal representation, violating their right to due process. Some prisoners have even been proven subsequently to not even have any ties to terrorism. This is a serious violation of human rights. It must be looked at seriously by those in charge. So in summary, the U.S. Patriot Act is a U.S. law that granted law enforcement more powers aimed at preventing terrorist attacks. The law also requires the financial industry to report various suspicious customer behaviors as a measure against terrorism-related money laundering. Proponents of the USA Patriot Act claim it aids law enforcement in combating terrorism. Many Americans oppose the U.S. Patriot Act, saying much of the law infringes on constitutional privacy rights. Well, now after all these facts and insight I've laid out for you in this episode of the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast, what do you think? Let us know in the comments section below. Send us a tweet at TrueCrimeNS. Or find us on Instagram at True Crime Never Sleeps. And we'll see you tomorrow. That's all we got. Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the True Crime Never Sleeps podcast. Follow us on Twitter at TrueCrimeNS. Like us on Facebook at True Crime Never Sleeps. Send us a voice message at anchor.fm/TrueCrimeNeverSleeps/message. Tune in next week for an all-new episode.